Good evening, America. Tonight we have an explosive show. Two legends, two symbols of America who aren't afraid to speak the truth, Chuck Norris and Clint Eastwood. Paul spreads his arms as the crowd erupts in applause. Chuck, Clint, welcome. Paul beams, though there's a hint of caution in his voice. You are icons who embody America. But let's be honest, you have different views on where our country is heading. Tonight, we want to dig deeper. Are you ready? All right, let's start with the big question. Paul leans forward, eyes gleaming. America is at a crossroads. The younger generation is demanding change, more equality, more openness. But many, especially the older generation, feel that these changes are tearing down the foundation on which this country was built. Chuck, your thoughts? Chuck sighs, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair. I respect the young people, Paul. They have energy, ideas. But I see them rejecting what made America strong: faith, family, respect for hard work. You can't build a future by burning the past. That's like cutting down the tree you're sitting on. The crowd erupts in applause, but Clint frowns, his eyes narrowing. He leans forward, his voice slicing through the air like a knife. Chuck, you talk about the foundation, but you forget that it wasn't solid for everyone. I grew up in a time when people were judged by the color of their skin, by where they came from. If the youth are demanding equality, maybe they just want what we promised, but didn't always deliver. The room quiets down and Paul, sensing tension rising, quickly steps in. Are we losing that in the rush for change? Don't switch, it's about to get even hotter. Chuck snaps toward Clint, his voice growing louder. Intolerance? Paul, this isn't just intolerance. It's censorship. I'm told I can't believe in God because it's offensive. That I can't talk about discipline because it's toxic. I fought for this country, Clint, and I won't let myself be canceled for telling the truth. The crowd roars, someone shouts, yes, Chuck, but Clint stands his ground. He rises from his chair, his face tense, his voice gaining strength. Chuck, you call that censorship? I call it accountability. You think I don't know struggle? I grew up during the Depression, worked on construction sites, made films when Hollywood was a Shark Tank. But I see the youth screaming because they've been ignored. You want truth? The truth is America can't be great if we divide it into US and them. The crowd erupts, applause mixed with shouts of protest. Paul tries to calm the audience, but his voice is drowned out by the noise. Gentlemen, please. He raises his hands. You both speak of America, but it seems you see it differently. Is there any chance of finding common ground? Chuck shakes his head, eyes blazing. Clint, I respect you. You've made great movies, you know life. But when I see young people rewriting history, calling our heroes oppressors, I can't stay silent. They don't know what real sacrifice is. They didn't see how we fought for freedom. Clint cuts in sharply, his voice thunderous. Sacrifice? Chuck, I've seen sacrifice. I made films about veterans, about people society threw away. But you don't see that young people are sacrificing too, their time, their energy, trying to fix what you and I didn't finish. You call it rewriting history? I call it trying to make it honest. The room descends into chaos. Some applaud Chuck, others shout in support of Clint. Paul, realizing he's losing control, clutches the table. All right, gentlemen, this is a passionate discussion. He forces a smile, but panic flickers in his eyes. Let's take a break. Chuck, Clint, you are both voices of America. Can you, let's say, shake hands? Chuck and Clint look at each other, their gazes like cross blades. Chuck clenches his fists, his voice low and tense. I'll shake hands when I see we're talking about one America, not two different worlds. Clint gives a cold smile, eyes locked on Chuck. I'll shake hands when you stop thinking the truth only belongs to you. The room holds its breath. Cameras zoom in, operators exchange nervous glances. Paul, sensing the show is on the brink of disaster, suddenly stands up. Well, America, this is just the beginning. We'll be back after the break. Don't change the channel, because what's coming next? You won't believe it. Don't switch, it's about to get even hotter. Suddenly, a loud voice from backstage cuts through the show's music. Everyone turns. A young woman, around 30, with short dark hair and fire in her eyes, walks onto the stage. She holds a microphone, and her voice slices through the air like a knife. "Excuse me for interrupting, Mr. Rivers, but I can't stay silent." She stops center stage, her gaze burning as it lands on Chuck and Clint. "You both talk about America, but neither of you talks about us, those of us living between your traditions and changes." The audience freezes. Paul looks stunned, his hands shaking as he tries to intervene. Ma'am, this is... Who are you? How did you get on stage?" He looks toward security, but the woman doesn't give him a chance. "My name is Amelia Cruz. I'm a journalist from Dallas, and I represent those you ignore." She turns to the crowd, her voice growing stronger. "While you argue about old values or new ideas, ordinary people, teachers, nurses, workers, are struggling just to survive in the America you both call great." Chuck and Clint exchange glances for the first time that evening. In their eyes is not anger, but curiosity. The audience erupts into applause, but the tension rises. Paul, trying to regain control, raises his hand. "Miss Cruz, this is a discussion show, but..." He falters as Amelia cuts him off. "Discussion? This isn't a discussion, this is a show. You pit legends against each other for ratings, but no one talks about the real issues." She turns to Chuck and Clint. "You want truth? Then listen to me." Clint leans forward, his raspy voice cuts through the silence. "All right, Amelia. Speak. What do you want to say?" Chuck nods, his face tense but attentive. "I'm listening. But choose your words wisely. I don't like empty accusations." Amelia takes a deep breath. Her hands tremble slightly, but she stands firm. "I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Dallas. My father was a veteran, like the ones you make movies about, Mr. Eastwood. He believed in the traditions you speak of, Mr. Norris. But you know what? He was fired because he couldn't afford a new car to commute to the factory. My sister is a nurse, works 12-hour shifts, but can't afford rent. We're not trying to cancel your values or rewrite history. We want an America where hard work, faith, and dreams still mean something." The crowd erupts in applause, louder than ever before, thunderous. Paul, sensing the show is slipping out of control, tries to jump in. "Miss Cruz, that's very moving, but let's return to our guests. Chuck, Clint, your thoughts?" Chuck slowly stands, his eyes fixed on Amelia. His voice is low, but sincere. "Amelia, I hear your pain, and I won't deny that the system breaks people. But tell me, how will your sister survive if we tear down the things that hold us together? Discipline, faith, responsibility? You accuse us, but what do you propose?" Amelia doesn't back down, her gaze still blazing. "I propose that you listen, Mr. Norris. Not just shout about values, but ask people how they're really living. You talk about discipline, but how do you stay disciplined when you're working 2 jobs and still can't afford medicine for your child?" Clint nods, his face serious. "She's right, Chuck. I've filmed stories about people like her father. But I admit we don't always see the full picture. Amelia, what do you want us to do? Specifically." Amelia falls silent for a moment, her eyes darting, as if she didn't expect that question. Then she speaks, her voice softer, but firm. "I want you to stop dividing America into old and new. Sit down with people, not on a show, but in real life. With those who work, struggle, believe. And don't just listen, act. You both have influence. Use it." The audience erupts again, but now with shouts of support mixed into the applause. Paul, realizing this moment could save the show, quickly steps in. This is incredible. Chuck, Clint, you heard Amelia. Are you ready to take on that challenge?" Chuck and Clint exchange another look. Chuck speaks first, his voice calm, but heavy. "I won't promise we'll agree on everything. But I'm ready to sit down and talk. Not for the cameras, for people like Amelia." Clint nods, his eyes glinting. "I'm in. But Amelia, You have to be there too. Without your truth, it won't matter. Amelia smiles for the first time that night. Her voice trembles with emotion. I will be. Suddenly, a new voice booms from backstage, sharp and official. Enough. A man in an expensive suit steps onto the stage, his face tense. Mr. Norris, Mr. Eastwood, this show is going off the rails. You can't just improvise like this without clearing it with the sponsors. The audience gasps. Paul turns pale, while Amelia faces the man, her eyes narrowing. Sponsors? Is this show about America or your money? She throws down the challenge, and the audience explodes in support. Chuck raises his hand, his voice slicing the air. Son, I fought for this country when your sponsors were still counting pennies. If we want to speak, we will speak. Clint smirks, his voice quiet but piercing. And if your sponsors have a problem with that, tell them I'll make a film about it. Trust me, they won't want to be the villains in my story. The crowd roars. Paul grabs a table, and the man in the suit backs off, his face burning. Amelia looks at Chuck and Clint, her eyes full of hope and challenge. So, gentlemen, are these just words, or are you serious? Chuck and Clint stare at each other again, their gazes a mix of respect and tension. Everyone holds their breath, waiting to see what comes next. So what now, gentlemen? Amelia repeats, her voice firm but laced with hope. Are those just words, or are you serious? Chuck nods slowly, his beard twitching slightly as he speaks. I'm serious, Amelia. I'm not promising that Clint and I will agree on everything, but I'm willing to listen. And not here, not for show. In the real world, where people like your sister live. Clint, his raspy voice cutting through the silence, adds, I'm in too. But Amelia, this won't be easy. If we start this conversation, you have to be ready to speak the truth, even when it hurts. Deal. Amelia smiles, her eyes shimmering with tears, but she holds steady. Deal. The hall erupts in applause, thunderous and overwhelming. Paul, sensing the show has reached its climax, jumps in quickly. America, this is a historic moment. Chuck Norris, Clint Eastwood, and Amelia Cruz promising a real conversation. He turns to the man in the suit, still standing in the wings. And what about you, Mr. Sponsor Representative? Are you with us or against us? The man in the suit opens his mouth, but under the pressure of the crowd's gaze and the camera lights, he falters. We'll discuss it. He mutters and vanishes into the shadows backstage. The crowd roars with excitement. Paul raises his arms, his voice trembling with emotion. That's it for tonight, but this is just the beginning. Thank you, Chuck, Clint, Amelia. We'll be back tomorrow, don't miss it. The show's music blares, the spotlights dim, but the buzz in the auditorium doesn't fade. The audience whispers, the cameras turn off, and social media explodes with headlines. Chuck and Clint join forces with Journalists Against Hollywood. Chuck, Clint, and Amelia stand on stage, exchanging looks. The tension hasn't vanished, but in their eyes, something new has formed, respect. The next morning, Dallas wakes under a cloudy sky. A small cafe downtown, the Texas Oak, smells of freshly baked rolls, strong coffee, and old wood. The walls are adorned with black and white photos of 1960s Dallas, and the soft hum of the air conditioner blends with the morning city sounds outside. Chuck Norris sits at a table by the window, holding a cup of coffee. His denim shirt is slightly wrinkled, but his posture radiates strength as always. Clint Eastwood, in a simple black shirt, sits across from him, his hat resting on the table. Amelia Cruz enters, wearing a light jacket and jeans, her face tense but determined. You came, she says, sitting down. I thought it was just a stunt for the show. Chuck smiles, his voice soft but steady. I don't do stunts, Amelia. If I said I'd listen, I meant it. Clint nods, taking a sip of his coffee. Same here. But let's get to it. You challenged us. What now? Amelia sighs, nervously twisting her spoon. I don't want this to be another show. I want you to meet the people I talked about. The ones who work, who struggle but aren't heard. My sister, for example. Or veterans who come home and can't find jobs. Or young people who want change but don't know how to get it. Chuck leans forward, eyes focused on her. I'll meet them. But tell me, Emilia, why do you think Clint and I can change any of this? We're not politicians. I'm an actor. He's a director. Emilia looks him straight in the eye. Because people listen to you, Mr. Norris. You and Clint, you're not just an actor and a director. You're symbols. If you show that it's possible to talk instead of shout, it gives people hope. Clint chuckles, but his smile is warm. Symbols, huh? I thought I was just an old guy making movies. He pauses, voice growing serious. But you're right. I've seen how my films change people's minds. If we can do that again, I'm in. They begin to talk, cautiously, at first, testing one another. Chuck shares stories from his youth, how he fought for his place in a world where strength and discipline were the only things keeping him afloat. Clint talks about 1960s Hollywood, about the people he met, workers, activists fighting for justice. Emilia speaks of her life, her father, a veteran who couldn't find his footing after returning from war, her sister, working herself to exhaustion, and a generation that longs for change but fears being ignored that an hour passes. Then another. The waiter, an elderly man with kind eyes, brings more coffee, smiling quietly, sensing something important is happening at this table. So what do we do? Emilia asks, her voice firm. Do we meet people? Organize something? Chuck nods, his face serious. I can talk to veterans groups. Bring in people who know what struggle means. But, Emilia, you've got to bring your youth. Without them, this won't work. Clint pulls out a notebook and starts writing. I can get us a place. There's an old theater I know in Dallas. We'll gather people, veterans, workers, students. Not for a show, but for a conversation. And maybe, he pauses, eyes sparkling. Maybe I'll make a movie about it. Emilia gasps, her eyes wide. A movie? Are you serious? Clint smiles. I don't joke about work, kid. Chuck shakes his head, but his smile is warm. You'll never change, Clint. But you know what? I'm in. If it helps people, I'm all in. They agree on the next steps. Emilia will contact local activists, Chuck will reach out to veterans, and Clint will handle logistics. They shake hands firmly, but with new respect that a week later, Dallas buzzes with rumors. The old Texas Star Theater opens its doors for an event locals call the Conversation of the Century. The auditorium fills with people, veterans in worn jackets, nurses in scrubs, students with posters, workers with calloused hands. Chuck, Clint, and Emilia stand on stage, not as celebrities, but as ordinary people ready to listen. The conversation begins tensely, voices overlapping, accusations flying. But Chuck raises his hand, his voice calm yet firm. We're not here to shout. We're here to understand. Clint adds, his eyes scanning the crowd. Each of you has a story. Tell it. We're listening. Emilia stands between them, her voice trembling but passionate. This isn't about who's right. It's about how we live together. For hours, people share their stories of loss, of hope, of struggle. A veteran talks about not finding a job. A student shares her fear of being unheard. A nurse speaks about burnout and pain. Chuck and Clint listen, ask questions, sometimes debate, but never shout. Emilia moderates, her voice becoming a bridge between generations. When the event ends, the applause is soft, filled with respect. People leave the theater talking to one another, exchanging numbers, planning future meetings. A month passes. Clint sits in his office in Los Angeles, a draft script in front of him. On the title page, The Conversation, a story of one America. He smiles, thinking of Emilia, Chuck, and the people they met. His phone rings, it's Emilia. We've planned another meeting, she says. In Houston. Are you in? I'm in, Clint replies that I in Dallas. Chuck stands before a group of veterans, telling them about their conversation. His voice is full of hope. We won't change the world in a day. But we've started. In her small apartment, Emilia writes an article for the local paper. Chuck Norris and Clint Eastwood showed that America can listen. Now what will you do? Dallas hums, America watches. No one knows where this conversation will lead, but there's a sense in the air that a small step has been taken. Chuck, Clint, and Amelia didn't solve every problem, but they proved that listening is possible, even when you feel like shouting. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to begin.